Data from the dummy, combined with motion capture of Steve's punch, provides an inside view of devastation.
The Wife Beater is an item that grants the user 100 defense, 200 charisma, and a 100% guarantee to win any encounter against women, whether it be in a fight or in bed. Rolon Donaire, the monster of Manila, is the king of Purgatory who reigns above all, being active in the underground promotion since its inception, along with securing a perfect record of 422 straight victories. That was until his first loss at the hands of Tokita Oma. Despite such an unparalleled record, along with being a prolific individual in the underground for driving the worm outside of the Philippines and fighting the Kuroki Gensei to a draw, his reputation within the story stands in stark contrast to his reputation among the readers, with Rolon coming across as an overhyped jobber rather than the fearsome king that he is meant to be. So, is Rolon Donaire deserving of his title of king who stands atop all gladiators? Or will his usurpers prove too much for Rolon to handle? Let's find out. In terms of durability, the amount of power that can be taken without sustaining damage, Rolon Donaire was unable to ignore an Iron Breaker from Tokita Oma. Therefore, characters stronger than Oma, or those who can match his power, can damage Rolon. In terms of endurance, the amount of damage that can be taken without getting knocked out, Rolon endured techniques from Oma, which were amplified by the fully unleashed output of his possessing spirit, an amp that enabled him to rival Rayan Kuri after he unleashed his latent power with the removal. However, after enduring such an onslaught, Rolon failed to endure a flashing steel from Oma, which was thrown with the right timing. Although Rolon was weakened by Oma's techniques, which were powered by the possessing spirit, Oma was still able to defeat his opponent with his attacks after the possessing spirit took a toll on him. Therefore, characters stronger than Oma, or those who can match his power, can defeat Rolon. In terms of movement speed, Rolon possesses agility that is said to be on another level, a statement which was justified when Yamashita Kazuo couldn't see his moves coming, demonstrating that Rolon is fast enough to overcome the Fist Eye. Therefore, Rolon can move just as fast as Rayan when he unleashes the removal, Oma when he unleashes the possessing spirit, and Kyuzan when he performs Raging Vigor, only being outclassed by the lightning god Mikazuchi Rei and the king of Hades, Edward Wu. In terms of striking speed, Rolon impressed Gowlan Wongzawat, who said that the speed of his strikes might be on par with his flash. Although it could be assumed that Rolon can strike as fast as Gowlan, considering that Gowlan's combination between Muay Thai and boxing represents the acme of his striking prowess, while his boxing techniques do not, Gowlan's acme of striking must be faster than the Flash, and as such, Gowlan can strike faster than Rolon. Therefore, Rolon's striking speed is only outclassed by Gowlan and other characters who could possibly match him. When it comes to reflexes, Rolon can react to his opponent's movements before they think of moving through pre-initiative, a style of foresight which heavily relies on the user's reflexes along with their ability to predict their opponent's next move. Therefore, Rolon's ability to react to his opponent is directly tied to whether his opponent can exceed his expectations, and as such, is less of a physical ability and more of a technical skill. In terms of power, Rolon has enough power to defeat Toei Mudo. However, Rolon is stated to be inferior to Toei in every physical attribute, including offensive power and defensive power. Furthermore, Rolon's strikes couldn't penetrate past Oma's Indestructible, a technique that the likes of Wakatsuki Takeshi overcame with his raw strength. Although Oma was far from his physical peak in his match with Wakatsuki, in his match with Rayan, where he was in a healthier physical condition, despite activating Indestructible, the impact of Rayan's throw was still able to draw Oma's blood, indicating that Rayan has enough power to overcome Oma's Indestructible. Since Oma himself states that Wakatsuki's blows were heavier than those he experienced from Rayan, and as such, implies that Wakatsuki has more power than Rayan, it stands to reason that Wakatsuki can overcome Oma's Indestructible whether he is healthy or not. In addition, Wakatsuki has demonstrated that he can exert enough power to defeat Julius Reinhold, and because Toei was as powerful as Julius, Wakatsuki, theoretically speaking of course, can exert enough power to defeat Toei. Therefore, since Rolon was unable to penetrate past Oma's Indestructible, and as a result, has less power than Wakatsuki, it should be impossible for Rolon to defeat Toei because he lacks the power. Nevertheless, this impossibility can be explained when taking into account Rolon's techniques and the strategies he uses to defeat his opponents. Now, on to technical skill. Rolon is a practitioner of Silat, a martial art which involves extremely close-quarters combat. The range at which Silat operates is the shortest of all martial arts, a range which reduces the amount of available options to only short-range techniques, like elbows, which not only possess offensive applications, with Silat's elbow strikes including many variations, including spinning elbows for more power, 12-6 elbows to strike from above, and elbow uppercuts to strike from below, but also defensive applications, being used for blocking, parrying, and taking opponents off balance. Furthermore, fighting in such conditions requires a great deal of precision, most likely because there is very little room for generating power, forcing practitioners to remove all the waste in their movements to better utilize all the power they have. The ability to fight in close quarters gives practitioners the opportunity to strike outside of their opponent's awareness, which disrupts the opponent's reactions by preventing them from seeing attacks, thus amplifying power by preventing opponents from defending in a timely manner, along with enabling practitioners to strike their opponent without warning, and as such, compromise an opponent's ability to endure blows. Furthermore, the precision required for fighting in such close quarters enables practitioners to accurately aim for their opponent's vitals, enabling them to deal more damage by striking their opponent's weak spots. In addition, the defensive application of Silat's elbows involves taking opponents off balance, which, according to Tokita Nico, provides a good opening for strikes, most likely serving to amplify power. Therefore, despite not possessing enough power to defeat Toei Mudo, Rolon was able to knock him out because he struck Toei from a blind spot in close quarters, reducing Toei's ability to endure Rolon's blows by preventing him from defending in a timely manner, along with enabling him to strike the giant without warning. Furthermore, Rolon is precise enough to accurately strike Toei's vitals, reducing the amount of power necessary to defeat Toei by harming a vulnerable region of his body. In addition, Rolon parried Toei's punch with an elbow, most likely taking him off balance, and thus enabling Rolon's power to permeate even further. Since Rolon required many of the technical aspects held within Silat working in tandem to defeat the Beast of Destruction, Roland's ability to defeat opponents with the power that he does possess is determined by whether or not his techniques are effective. For Roland's techniques to be effective, he needs to be able to force his opponents into close quarters, with his ability to do so being determined by a skill that gives him near complete control over mats. Initially developed by the practitioners of the Kaiwan style to combat armed opponents, pre-initiative is the highest form of foresight that involves sensing the inception of intent, predicting when the opponent is about to move using visual cues along with sensing the airflow on the skin and every hair, and moving immediately before them, using reflexes to launch an attack before they attack. Besides enabling fighters to strike what they cannot see, this technique enables them to counter movements before they begin, dodge attacks before they start, and exceed expectations. Furthermore, pre-initiative enables Rolon to place a seal on his opponent's moves by giving him the ability to check attacks before they can be used, enabling Rolon to force his opponent into close quarters by checking every other technique besides those that can be used in close range, giving Rolon the ability to confine the mats to his domain, where he can utilize his techniques in the best possible manner. However, the more complicated a mat becomes, the more effective little techniques become, which is why something as benign as using never-before-seen attacks or speeding up in bursts is able to render pre-initiative futile because it disrupts predictions. Furthermore, if an opponent can strike faster than the opponent's predictions, they can overcome pre-initiative through nothing but the speed of their strikes. Nevertheless, overcoming Roland's pre-initiative is easier said than done because his foresight is on another level. Considering how fights between pre-initiative users are determined by whose pre-initiative is better, the fighter who can predict the furthest will succeed in landing their attacks. So, by overcoming Oma's pre-initiative, a skill that he mastered by successfully using it to dodge Roland's strikes before they were launched, Roland has demonstrated the ability to predict more moves ahead than Oma. Furthermore, by holding his own against Kuroki, Roland has demonstrated the ability to predict as many moves as him. Although Roland achieved this feat against a younger iteration of Kuroki, who may have been weaker than his Annihilation Tournament counterpart, during the tournament itself, Kuroki states that it has been a long time since he had to use his foresight, and that he had to check he wasn't rusty, implying that since mastering such an ability, Kuroki never improved upon it and maintained it at the same level, meaning that when it comes to pre-initiative, Roland has reached the mastery of it that is only shared by one other character, even in rare cases where his opponent is able to exceed his foresight. Roland possesses techniques that serve as fail-safes in instances where he cannot finish the match in close quarters. In the absence of his foresight, Roland can limit his opponent's moves by grappling, striking acupuncture points to perform takedowns, along with initiating locks to immobilize his opponent, enabling Roland to use his short-range techniques in a position where his opponent cannot defend properly. Furthermore, when Roland can no longer strike from outside the opponent's awareness in close quarters, he can utilize the invisible elbow to launch elbow strikes from his opponent's blind spot, enabling Roland to strike outside his opponent's awareness without needing to do so in close quarters. Although Roland is considered the ultimate all-rounder who can adapt to any situation, the level of specialization that Roland has achieved through his mastery of Sealot and pre-initiative makes him more of a specialist because he excels by limiting his opponent's options and forcing them to fight on his terms, while an all-rounder excels by expanding options and changing their tactics to counter their opponent's style. Therefore, in regard to Rolon's fighting style, he has struck a unilateral relationship between adaptation and specialization, with his ability to adapt serving as a crutch in unfavorable conditions, while his specialization, his mastery of Celot and Pre-Initiative, serving as his primary strategy. Now, on to matchups. Although I could discuss what Carlos has said regarding the Monster of Manila, I'll still treat this like a matchup. In terms of physical abilities, Carlos Madel is faster than Gowland Wangzawat, and was able to avoid direct blows despite his opponent unleashing his combination between Muay Thai and boxing. Since Rolon Donaire is able to match Gowland's flash, and considering that Gowland's combination between Muay Thai and boxing is the pinnacle of his striking prowess, while his flash isn't, Rolon is not fast enough to land his attacks on Carlos. When it comes to power, Carlos was able to crack Gowland's forearm with his kicks, forearms which are able to withstand punches from Kano Agito. Although I could assume that Carlos has more power than Agito, that's incorrect because the human leg is 3 times more powerful than the arm, and since Gowland checked Agito's kicks, he failed to exert more of his power, whereas Carlos succeeded. Nevertheless, Carlos's power is in a comparable league to Agito's power, with his kicks being able to do more damage than Agito's punches, and Agito's kicks most likely outperforming Carlos's kicks. Furthermore, according to Rolon, Rayan Kuri is on par with Agito, and since Carlos's power is in a comparable league to Agito's power, Carlos compares to Rayan in the same way. In addition, due to their sparring record, Rayan is stronger than Tokita Oma, and since Oma had enough power to defeat Rolon, as the logic goes, Carlos does as well. On a purely physical basis, Carlos has the advantage in this matchup. For Rolon to land his attacks and exert enough power to defeat his opponent, he must rely on his technical skills. Carlos Madel is a classical boxer who excels at infighting, boxing within close quarters. But his skills as a boxer is secondary to his skill as a capoeirista, a style of combat which involves movements akin to that of an acrobat and kicks that can be thrown at a longer range. Furthermore, Carlos has arrived at the pinnacle of foresight, which he uses to dodge strikes before they begin, making him untouchable. But if opponents are able to overcome his pre-initiative, Carlos will be forced to weather his opponent's blows, and considering his build, his tolerance for withstanding blows is notably pathetic. Fortunately for Rolon, Carlos was impressed by Oma's pre-initiative, implying that his foresight is on a similar level. Since Rolon was able to overcome Oma's pre-initiative and land his techniques by using his own foresight to check Oma's movements, Rolon can land blows on Carlos. As such, Rolon can check Carlos's movements before they begin, and to use his techniques in the best possible manner, he will force Carlos into close quarters, a range at which Carlos will not be able to unleash his kicks. Although Carlos is an expert at boxing in close quarters, his punching techniques do not have the same power as his kicks, and Rolon will ultimately dodge his punching techniques before they begin. Therefore, Rolon can defeat the genius of striking. Rolon wins. The magician who performs his tricks for an audience of A-list gladiators versus the king of the organization. Gee, I wonder who wins. In terms of physical abilities, the Falcon is able to damage Rihito by drawing his blood. Since Mokichi Robinson did the same thing to Rihito, Falcon has enough power to match Mokichi. Although Mokichi failed to bring out his full power against Rihito, his opponent states that Mokichi was sharper than he was in Ashura, indicating how Mokichi improved over the 2-year time skip. Considering how Mokichi was able to damage Rayan by drawing his blood, and that Falcon is able to match Mokichi's power after he improved, Falcon should be able to damage Rayan in a similar manner. Since Tokida Oma possesses enough power to damage Rayan, Falcon possesses a comparable level of power to Oma, and because Oma has enough power to defeat Rolon, as the logic goes, Falcon does as well. In terms of speed, the Falcon is faster than Rihito, a level of speed that doesn't compare to Rolon. For Falcon to land his attacks and defeat Rolon, he must rely on his technical skills. Albert Lee is a well-rounded ninjutsu master who can strike at any range using a variety of kicks, punches, elbows, along with other techniques that are enhanced by his partially trained claws, and grappling techniques like locks and holds. Furthermore, Falcon's ninjutsu consists of feints to take his opponents by surprise, sidesteps to throw off his opponent's timing, and the Toxic Avenger, a means of transmitting poison that slows his opponents down after repeatedly entering the bloodstream. Although Rihito was able to overcome these techniques through his brute strength that enabled him to land a decisive counter, such techniques are more deadly against opponents who possess great insight. Even though Rolon possesses great insight, Falcon's feints were easily defeated by the likes of Rihito, who was able to predict Falcon's next move without arriving at the pinnacle of foresight, while Falcon's sidestep is a simplified version of the fake Uzaki Momon's false body, something that Toku no Tokumichi could counter after seeing it only once. Since Nitoku said that Rolon possesses more pressure than Agito, a person who gave Nitoku his first loss, he implies that Rolon is a superior fighter to himself, and as such, can overcome Uzaki's false body, a sidestepping technique that is more complicated than Falcon's sidestep. Therefore, Falcon cannot exceed Rolon's expectations, and as such, will check Falcon's moves before they begin, and to use his techniques in the best possible manner, will confine the match to close quarters, a range at which Falcon cannot utilize his poison-coated toes by kicking and cannot make direct contact to execute his grappling techniques. Therefore, Rolon can overcome the self-styled ninja. Rolon wins. Only the strongest A-list gladiators get the chance to challenge the king. Toei Mudo, the Beast of Destruction, is one of the few to have done so. And as you all know, Rolon Donaire won. But I digress. In terms of physical abilities, Toei outclasses Rolon when it comes to both offensive power and defensive power, indicating how Toei has more than enough power to defeat Rolon, while Rolon doesn't have enough power to defeat Toei. When it comes to speed, Toei is as fast as Julius Reinhold, a level of speed that doesn't compare to Rolon. For Toei to land his attacks and defeat Rolon, he must rely on his technical skills. The martial art passed down among the Mudo family consists of offensive techniques like chops, punches, hammer fists, and stomps, along with defensive techniques that involve dispersing power and redirecting power, with the combination of both techniques culminating in Breeding Mountain, a counter that turns the opponent's power against them along with the user's power. Fortunately for Rolon, Toei cannot overcome his foresight. Therefore, Rolon will check Toei's movements before they begin and confine the match to close quarters, where Rolon can use his techniques in the best possible manner. Furthermore, by throwing his strikes preemptively, Rolon can neutralize Toei's defensive techniques by throwing his strikes before Toei can disperse the power or redirect it, preventing Toei from unleashing his Breeding Mountain. Therefore, despite being outclassed physically, Rolon can still defeat the Beast of Destruction. Rolon wins. Based on the ways these two interact, this matchup should be a no-brainer. In terms of physical abilities, Yumigahama Hikaru has enough power to defeat Jose Kanzaki. Since Gao Ryuki's Earth-Crouching Dragon was able to damage Jose, Yumigahama must have a similar level of power to Ryuki. However, Ryuki notes that Jose was hiding his power and that he would have been in trouble if Jose was fighting seriously. Therefore, since Yumigahama defeated Jose 2 times in a row, and because he was most likely taking the matches seriously because they took place in Purgatory, Yumigahama is stronger than Ryuki. Since Ryuki was able to damage Nidon Monkbot by drawing his blood, Yumigahama, at bare minimum, can do the same thing. In addition, considering that Nidon can match Kurei Rain when it comes to raw strength, as we will discuss in the next matchup, Yumigahama can damage Rain by drawing his blood. Since Oma possesses enough power to damage Rain, Yumigahama possesses a comparable level of power to Oma, and because Oma has enough power to defeat Rolon, as the logic goes, so does Yumi. Yet, when it comes to speed, Yumigahama is slower than Misasa, a level of speed that doesn't compare to Rolon. For Yumigahama to land his techniques and defeat Rolon, he must rely on his technical skills. The Trader Fang is a collector, a fighter who steals techniques from other martial artists, specifically those who try to imitate weapons. Although these techniques are seamlessly incorporated and as such, pale in comparison to those who master them, it has transformed Yumi into a human weapon with an almost limitless arsenal of techniques. Unfortunately for Yumigahama, his movements are not precise, and because wasteful movements are something that fighters can see coming from a mile away, Rolon can easily predict him. Thus, Rolon will check Yumigahama's movements before they begin, and to use his techniques in the best possible manner, will confine the match to close quarters, a range at which Yumigahama's size works against him. Therefore, Rolon can defeat the Trader Fang. Rolon wins. Considering that Rolon Donaire is a hunter who preys on worms, he will be out to defeat Nidon Monkbot as disrespectfully as possible. In terms of physical abilities, according to Gaolan Wangzawat, Nidon can match Julius Reinhold in terms of pure strength. Since Julius can match Toei Muda when it comes to power, and considering that Toei outclasses Rolon when it comes to offensive power, as the logic goes, Nidon outclasses Rolon as well. However, Gaolan states that Nidon can also be matched by Wakatsuki Takeshi and Reian Kuri. Since Tokita Oma states that Wakatsuki's blows were heavier than those he experienced from Reian, Wakatsuki is stronger than Reian. In addition, since Sekaba Hasu-jun states that Julius possesses more raw power than Wakatsuki, by that logic, Julius is also stronger than Reian. Therefore, if Nidon can match Reian in terms of pure strength, that must mean that both Wakatsuki and Julius exceed Nidon because they possess more power than Reian. Therefore, Nidon doesn't outclass Rolon the way Toei does. But since Nidon is able to match Reian when it comes to pure strength, he is just as strong as him. In addition, Reian is stronger than Oma due to their sparring record, and because Oma has enough power to defeat Rolon, as the logic goes, Nidon does as well. In terms of speed, Nidon was able to keep up with the movements of Gao Ryuki. However, he was unable to track him when he went for the kill, a level of speed that doesn't compare to Rolon. For Nidon to land his attacks and defeat Rolon, he must rely upon his technical skills. Nidon is a Mongolian wrestler who is as precise as a machine and possesses the stunning strikes of a grappling-based martial art, with such strikes consisting of punches and kicks, along with grappling techniques like throws and locks. Furthermore, Nidon can foresee his opponent's movements with the eye of the sky, and can take his opponents off balance to prevent them from exerting their power, creating the perfect opportunity to use his grappling moves. Fortunately for Rolon, Nidon has not arrived at the pinnacle of foresight, and as such, cannot compete against Rolon's pre-initiative. Thus, Rolon will check Nidon's moves before they begin, and to use his techniques in the best possible manner, will confine the match to close quarters, a range at which Nidon will fail to make direct contact to execute his grappling techniques. Therefore, Rolon can defeat the Hawk of Ordos. Rolon wins. The centipede who crawled underneath the nose of the king and poised himself for a coup. In terms of physical abilities, Lu Tian is able to block a punch from Reian Kuri without any effort. Since Rolon Donaire is weaker than Reian because his strikes couldn't penetrate past Tokita Oma's indestructible, while Reian's throw was able to do so, Rolon does not have enough power to damage Lu. Furthermore, when Lu uses Guhun, a technique that unleashes his latent power, he is as strong as Julius Reinhold. Since Julius was as strong as Toei Mudo, and because Toei outclassed Rolon in terms of power, Lu outclasses Rolon in the same way. In terms of speed, Lu at his peak was faster than Agito, a level of speed that doesn't compare to Rolon. For Lu to land his attacks and defeat Rolon, and for Rolon to exert enough power to defeat Lu, both combatants must rely on their technical skill. Lu Tian is a practitioner of the formless style, a martial art involving a large selection of options, including a variety of kicks, punches, and elbows, along with grappling techniques like throws, locks, and holds, with such a variety of options enabling Lu to adapt to any situation. Furthermore, formless practitioners possess no form, making it harder for opponents to predict their next move, making Lu the natural enemy of foresight. Fortunately for Rolon, due to holding his own against Kuroki Gensei, Rolon has equal foresight to him. Since Kuroki was unshaken by Kano Agito's formless techniques, and was able to find an opening to attack, Rolon should be able to overcome the formless style in much the same fashion. However, Lu's formless techniques are deeper than Agito's techniques. Therefore, it would be harder for Rolon to find an opening in Lu's formless because it's superior. However, considering that Rolon has equal foresight to Kuroki, and that Agito lost the contest of predictions to someone with comparable foresight, Rolon has greater foresight than Agito. Since Agito was able to block Lu's formless techniques using his foresight, Rolon can most likely defend himself against Lu's formless in a much greater fashion because his foresight is superior. Therefore, both combatants will encounter a stalemate, one in which Lu fails to directly land his attacks, while Rolon fails to find an opening to attack. Ultimately, the victor of this matchup will be determined by the fail-safe techniques each combatant uses when their primary strategy fails. In such instances, Lu resorts to Guhun, which, as discussed earlier, improves his physical abilities. However, Lu is not a member of the Kure or Wu clans and is not blessed by generations of selective breeding to handle the strain. Thus, Lu will sustain severe physical damage, and because damage causes stamina to decrease, along with how reflexes decline relative to stamina, when Lu's reflexes decline, his formless techniques will deteriorate. Furthermore, when Lu uses formless and Guhun in tandem, Agito was able to counter Lu's formless techniques without switching to formless, and because he used punching combinations along with the Dragon Sword, Agito was countering Lu's formless techniques while using martial arts, despite not being able to do so prior, thus indicating how Lu's techniques got worse because Agito could predict his movements and counter them. Although sudden bursts of speed are able to overcome Rolon's foresight, and that Lu can steadily increase the output of Guhun to do just that, if Agito was able to counter it with his foresight, Rolon should be able to defend himself to a much greater degree because his foresight is better. Therefore, if Lu uses Guhun, Rolon will be able to break the stalemate because Lu's formless techniques will decay, enabling Rolon to find an opening in Lu's formless to land his techniques, giving Rolon the opportunity to check Lu's movements and confine the match to close quarters where he can use his techniques in the best possible manner to defeat the centipede. Even if Lu was not kind enough to break the stalemate for his opponent, Rolon would overcome the stalemate with the invisible elbow, a technique that enables Rolon to launch elbow strikes from outside his opponent's awareness by using a blind spot. Since blind spots disrupt reflexes by preventing the opponent from seeing their opponent's move, the invisible elbow will compromise Lu's formless techniques and enable Rolon to strike Lu without warning, causing Lu's reflexes to decline and his formless techniques to decay, resulting in the same outcome as before. Therefore, any way you dice it, Rolon squashes the usurper. Rolon wins. Compared to the last one, this will be a fast one. In terms of physical abilities, Alan Wu failed to damage Reian Kuri while using Guhun, a technique that unleashes his latent power. Since Tokita Oma is strong enough to damage Reian, Alan is weaker than Oma, and because Oma is strong enough to defeat Rolon Donaire, as the logic goes, Alan does not have the power to defeat Rolon. Furthermore, in terms of speed, Alan is slower than Reian, a level of speed that doesn't compare to Rolon. Therefore, unlike the rest of the fighters discussed up till now, Alan does not exceed Rolon in any physical attributes. Thus, Rolon does not need to use his techniques to the same degree to defeat Alan compared to any of the fighters discussed so far. Therefore, Rolon slaughters the King of Slaughter. Rolon wins. It is said that there are two kings in Purgatory, Rolon Donaire, who reigns as the king, and Arasayama Jiroda, who reigns as his gentle counterpart. In terms of physical abilities, Hayami Masaki states that Jiroda is stronger than him. Furthermore, between the two opponents that defeated him, Utsubuki Kokoro states that Hayami might be even stronger than Gao Ryuki. Therefore, Jiroda must be stronger than Ryuki. Since Ryuki was strong enough to damage Naidan Monkbot by drawing his blood, Jiroda, at bare minimum, is strong enough to do the same. Since Naidan can match Reian Kuri when it comes to pure strength, as discussed previously in this video, Jiroda should be able to damage Reian by drawing his blood. Since Oma has enough power to damage Reian, Jiroda possesses a comparable level of power to him, and because Oma has enough power to defeat Rolon, as the logic goes, Jiroda does as well. In terms of speed, Jiroda was able to overcome the Fist Eye. However, Jiroda's ability to do so was dependent on his technical skills rather than his speed. Therefore, Jiroda doesn't compare to Rolon. For Jiroda to land his attacks and defeat Rolon, the Gentle King must rely on his technical skills. Arasayama Jiroda is a judo practitioner who has neglected all forms of striking in favor of grappling techniques like holds, locks, and most of all, the throw, a technique that possesses lag due to the grab needed for the technique. However, Jiroda has mastered the throw to the point that he can throw his opponent without grabbing them, using only the friction of his skin to manipulate his opponent's center of gravity, enabling Jiroda to eliminate the lag associated with the throw. Furthermore, because Jiroda does not make the traditional motions for the throw, his throws can evade the detection of Yamashita Kazuo's Fist Eye, indicating how Jiroda's motions are too alien and minuscule for others to see, rather than it being way too fast for detection. Fortunately for Rolon, although he cannot see Jiroda's swing, Rolon can react to it thanks to his foresight. Since pre-initiative involves the inception of intent, sensing the airflow on the skin and every hair to react or predict the opponent's next move, in contrast to relying only on the user's vision, fighters who have attained pre-initiative can counter techniques they can't see. Since Rolon has achieved pre-initiative by sensing the inception of intent, he should be able to overcome Jiroda's swing. Therefore, Rolon will check Jiroda's movements before they begin, and to use his techniques in the best possible manner, will confine the match to close quarters, a range at which Jiroda will fail to make direct contact to execute his grappling techniques, including the swing. Thus, Rolon can defeat his gentle counterpart. Rolon wins. The Grim Reaper of Paris is a fighter who has warranted the respect of Purgatory's king. In terms of physical abilities, Nicholas Leybanner was able to damage Akoya Seisu by drawing his blood. Since Akoya and Naidan Monkbot were both able to block blows from Ryuki without sustaining any damage, Akoya is as durable as Naidan. Therefore, Nicholas can damage Naidan by drawing his blood. Furthermore, as discussed previously in this video, since Nidon can match Rei and Kuri when it comes to pure strength, Nicholas should be able to damage Rayan in a similar manner. Since Oma possesses enough power to damage Rayan, Nicholas possesses a comparable level of power to Oma, and because Oma has enough power to defeat Rolon, as the logic goes, Nicholas does as well. When it comes to speed, Nicholas possesses reflexes beyond human limits and is slightly slower than Akoya. Although Rolon's reflexes do not compare to Nicholas, Rolon has demonstrated movement speed and striking speed which Nicholas has yet to achieve. Therefore, in terms of speed, Nicholas doesn't compare to Rolon. For Nicholas to land his attacks and defeat Rolon, he must rely on his technical skills. Nicholas Leybanner practices a self-styled martial art which combines elements from fencing, savate, and karate, providing Nicholas, who has a wingspan greater than his height, techniques that can be used at a longer distance, like a variety of punches, spear hand strikes, and kicks. Furthermore, Nicholas is precise enough to apply pressure onto his opponent's nerves to temporarily paralyze them, enabling Nicholas to immobilize his opponent and prevent their organs from functioning. However, such techniques do not work as efficiently on fighters as large as Akoya. Therefore, if Nicholas can land a single blow on Rolon, who is lovingly called the Manlet of Manila, he can immobilize him and land his attacks. Fortunately for Rolon, he has arrived at the pinnacle of foresight, and as such, can dodge Nicholas's attacks before they begin. Since Nicholas cannot compromise Rolon's mobility by paralyzing him, Rolon can check his movements before they begin, and to use his techniques in the best possible manner, will confine Nicholas to close quarters, a range at which he can no longer use his superior range to his advantage. Therefore, Rolon can avoid the Grim Reaper's judgment. Rolon wins. Much like Nicholas, Leo Dongqing has warranted Rolon's respect by being quote-unquote talented enough to go toe-to-toe with him. In terms of physical abilities, Leo was able to damage Toku no Tokumichi by drawing his blood. Since Kano Ajuto was able to do the same thing to Nitoku, Leo possesses a comparable level of power to Ajuto. Since Ajuto is on par with Rei and Kuri, Leo compares to Rayan in the same fashion. In addition, due to their sparring record, Rayan is stronger than Tokita Oma, and since Oma had enough power to defeat Rolon, as the logic goes, Leo does as well. In terms of speed, Leo is faster than Nitoku, a level of speed that doesn't compare to Rolon. For Leo to land his attacks and defeat Rolon, he must rely on his technical skills. Leo Dongqing is a Chinese martial artist who relies on striking techniques like a variety of kicks, punches, elbows, and other techniques that enable him to maximize his sword build. In addition, Leo has mastered Fajin, a method of transmitting power in which the force penetrates past the exterior and reaches inside the human body, along with Hajun, a method of redirecting his opponent's power. Furthermore, Leo can discern his opponent's next move and strike first by moving at the same time, implying that Leo not only possesses foresight, but more specifically, counter-initiative. Fortunately for Rolon, Leo has not reached the pinnacle of foresight, and as such, cannot compete against this pre-initiative. Therefore, Rolon will check Leo's movements before it begins and confine the match to close quarters where it can use his techniques in the best possible manner. Furthermore, by throwing his strikes preemptively, Rolon can neutralize Leo's defensive techniques by throwing his strikes before he can redirect it. Therefore, Rolon can defeat the weakest member of the 3 Demon Fists. Rolon wins. An assassin who entered Purgatory for the purpose of eliminating the mentally handicapped. In terms of physical abilities, due to an operation on his hypothalamus, Terasi can sever at a rate 15 times greater than the average human. Due to these vibrations, Terasi's strikes, which Okubo Naoya could resist with ease, became strong enough to send Okubo reeling and make him use Purgatory's knockdown system, because Terasi's power was able to penetrate past the exterior and directly into the human body, similar to a Fajin. In addition, according to Kamaki's translation, Terasi's vibrations amplify his power by enabling his strikes to impact multiple times rather than just once. Since this is the nature of his strikes, Terasi has the ability to damage Rolon. Furthermore, through the same surgery that enhanced his hypothalamus, Terasi was given the Emperor's Eye, an artificial version of the Fist Eye, with kinetic vision that surpasses it by improving the brain's processing speed to a higher degree. Therefore, despite overcoming the Fist Eye, Rolon Donaire's speed is no guarantee against Terasi because his vision is better. On a purely physical basis, Terasi has the edge in this matchup. For Rolon to land his techniques and exert enough power to defeat Terasi, he must rely on his technical skills. Besides using his vibrations to amplify his power, Terasi can use it to disperse his opponent's power. However, Terasi cannot vibrate his body indefinitely because he runs the risk of overheating, placing a time limit on Terasi's defensive and offensive abilities. In addition, Terasi's vibrations cannot protect his head because doing so will give him a concussion. Thus, Terasi's head is a major weak spot. Fortunately for Rolon, Terasi cannot exceed Rolon's expectations. However, Rolon will fail to check Terasi's movements because his Emperor's Eye will enable him to keep up with Rolon's movements, preventing Rolon from confining the match to close quarters. Even so, Rolon can dodge Terasi's strikes before it begins, and extended use of abilities like the Fist Eye increase exhaustion. Since Terasi cannot turn the Emperor's Eye off, he will eventually fail to keep up with the flood of information entering his brain, and when that time comes, Rolon will be able to land his strikes and check Terasi's movements, enabling him to confine the match in close quarters where he can strike from outside Terasi's awareness, thus enabling Rolon to strike Terasi's head. Furthermore, before Terasi inevitably exhausts himself, Rolon can rely upon the invisible elbow to launch elbow strikes from Terasi's blind spot, enabling Rolon to attack Terasi's weak spot even if the latter isn't exhausted. Therefore, Rolon defeats Discount Slenderman. Rolon wins. As the King of Purgatory, Fei Wangfang serves as the greatest challenger to Rolon Donaire's authority. In terms of physical abilities, when using Nico-style techniques that amplify his power, Fei was able to damage Wakatsuki Takeshi by cracking his bones and drawing his blood. Furthermore, when using Divine Demon, a technique that amplifies physical abilities, Fei was able to do much the same, and, at the height of his power, Fei was able to deliver a blow that Wakatsuki couldn't endure. Since Kano Azuto was able to draw Wakatsuki's blood and injure his ankle, Fei, if we were to lowball his power, is just as strong as Azuto. Since Azuto is on par with Rei and Kuri, Fei should be just as strong as Rayan. In addition, due to their sparring record, Rayan is stronger than Tokita Oma, and because Oma has enough power to defeat Rolon, As the logic goes, Faye does as well. In terms of speed, Faye is faster than Wakatsuki, a level of speed that doesn't compare to Rolon. However, Faye's Divine Demon boasts an output of the possessing spirit that is greater than Oma's advance, and as such, Faye receives a greater boost to his physical abilities than him. Since Wakatsuki was fast enough to find the right timing to prevent Tokita Oma's techniques from taking effect, and considering how he found it much harder to seal Faye's Nico style because he was, by his own account, too slow, Faye is faster than Oma, and because he receives a greater boost than him, Faye, at bare minimum, can match Oma's top speed. As such, Faye can overcome Yamashita Kazuo's Fist Eye. Furthermore, since Oma was able to match Reian's striking speed after unleashing his possessing spirit, Faye, at bare minimum, can do so as well with Divine Demon. In addition, because Reian was fast enough to overcome Oma's pre-initiative in one of their sparring matches without any amplification from the removal, Faye, at bare minimum, can match that kind of speed with Divine Demon. Therefore, when it comes to striking speed, Faye is in a similar league to Gowlan because they're both fast enough to overcome the pinnacle of foresight. Since strikes as fast as the Flash fail to overcome pre-initiative, and that Rolon can match the Flash, Faye is faster than Rolon. In addition, with Divine Demon, Faye has access to the enhanced depth perception of Fallen Demon, enabling him to see his opponent in slow motion by improving his processing speed to a higher degree, in the same way that Terasi's Emperor's Eye operates. Therefore, Rolon's speed was never a guarantee against Faye because his vision is better than the Fist Eye. On a purely physical basis, Faye Wangfang has the edge in this matchup. For Rolon to land his attacks and exert enough power to defeat Faye, he must rely upon his technical skills. Faye Wangfang is a practitioner of the Nico style, a martial art consisting of 4 katas, centered around different skills. The redirection kata involves precise motions that manipulate the center of gravity and controls the flow of power, enabling Faye to perform locking and throwing techniques that use the opponent's power against them. The water kata involves flexible motions and the fluidity to accelerate or decelerate power, enabling Faye to perform holds, disperse power, and amplify power. The flame kata involves movements that amplify speed, bewilder opponents, and generate power, enabling Faye to move faster, amplify his power, and take his opponents by surprise. The adamantine kata involves tightening muscles for defensive and offensive purposes, enabling Faye to withstand more power and amplify the power of his strikes. Fortunately for Rolon, Faye doesn't possess the pinnacle of foresight, and despite the amplification he receives from his flame kata techniques, he isn't fast enough to overcome Rolon's pre-initiative. Although the Nico style was somewhat effective against Kuroki, an opponent whom Rolon compares in terms of foresight, it was only possible because of Kuroki's preconceived notion that Oma couldn't use his Nico style in tandem with the advance, along with his caution toward Demon's Bane, which slowed his reaction to other attacks. Since Faye doesn't regulate the possessing spirit to the same degree as Oma, and cannot instill the same caution because he doesn't know Demon's Bane, he cannot exceed Rolon's expectations. Therefore, Rolon can seal the Nico style before Faye has a chance to use it by checking his movements before they begin. Therefore, to avoid a confrontation in close quarters, Faye will have to resort to Divine Demon. Due to Faye's enhanced perceptions, he will be able to keep up with Rolon's movements, and as such, cannot be confined to close quarters. Furthermore, due to Fei's enhanced physical abilities, he can now move just as fast as Rolon and can strike fast enough to overcome pre-initiative. However, Fei has achieved this level of speed through a higher than normal output of the possessing spirit, a technique that sacrifices the user's precise motions in exchange for speed. Therefore, the possessing spirit creates waste that makes Fei's movements more predictable. Therefore, while possessing the speed necessary for overcoming pre-initiative, he doesn't have the precision that makes his moves less obvious. Therefore, Fei can't overcome Rolon's pre-initiative. As such, both combatants will encounter a stalemate, one in which Rolon can dodge Fei's strikes before they begin, and Fei can dodge Rolon's strikes through his enhanced perceptions. In such a situation, Fei has no other choice but to continue using Divine Demon, because without it, Fei cannot keep up with Rolon's movements. If Fei was to increase the output, he admits that it would be irreversible, indicating how increasing the output would kill him. Therefore, Fei will have to maintain the output at his usual level if he wants to continue fighting. Furthermore, the possessing spirit places a burden on the user's circulatory system, which damages the user and causes their organs to fail. Therefore, as the match continues, Fei will slowly accumulate damage, and as damage increases, his body will fail to keep up with the flood of information entering his brain. When that time comes, Rolon will be able to break the stalemate, because Fei will no longer be able to dodge Rolon's blows, enabling him to check his opponent's moves and confine the match to close quarters, where he can use his techniques in the best possible manner. In addition, Rolon can expedite the process by utilizing the invisible elbow to launch elbow strikes from a position in which Fei's enhanced perceptions cannot detect it, enabling Rolon to damage Fei and accelerate the process until he can do so in close quarters. Therefore, Rolon can defeat his most powerful usurper yet, and continue to reign as Purgatory's one and only king. Rolon wins. Now, to the Kengan Association. Considering that no Purgatory gladiator can defeat Rolon Donaire, he will be facing off against the Kengan Association's Elite Four, which includes Kuroki Gensei, Kano Ajito, Rei Kuri, and Tokida Oma. But first, some honorable mentions. The Wild Tiger of the Kengan matches possesses a record of 309 victories and 3 losses, a record that is only outdone by the King of Purgatory. In terms of physical abilities, Wakatsuki Takeshi is an exceptional case of the Superman syndrome, a rare disorder characterized by power that exceeds human limits due to abnormal muscle growth and muscle fiber density. Although there exists a wide range in power between cases of Superman syndrome, Wakatsuki won the genetic lottery and received muscles 52 times denser than normal, making him the physically strongest among all recorded cases. Due to his anomalous strength, Wakatsuki can match Julius Reinhold when it comes to power. Furthermore, because Julius matched Toei Mudo when it comes to power, and since Toei outclasses Rolon when it comes to offensive power, as the logic goes, Wakatsuki outclasses him as well. As such, he has more than enough power to defeat Rolon. In terms of speed, Wakatsuki is slower than Mutebe Gezinga, a level of speed that doesn't compare to Rolon. For Wakatsuki to land his techniques and defeat Rolon, he must rely on his technical skills. Wakatsuki Takeshi is a full-contact karate practitioner, a style of combat that involves short-range infighting using a variety of punches and elbows, along with kicks that can be executed at a longer range. Furthermore, after losing to Kano Ajito, Wakatsuki developed two fangs to defeat his superiors. The first was the Blast Core, the strongest technique in Wakatsuki's arsenal, which involves compressing all of his muscles to a singular point and releasing all of his power all at once using a reverse punch, while the second was grappling techniques, enabling Wakatsuki to perform throws and holds using his immense power. In addition, after his defeat at the hands of Tokita Oma, Wakatsuki prepared a countermeasure against the Nikko style, which involves putting his opponent in a clinch, a position where the water kata's effectiveness is compromised, and attacking using a variety of knee strikes. Although this countermeasure was designed to counter the Nikko style, it should be effective against other fighters who can disperse power, like Rolon. Fortunately for Rolon, Wakatsuki cannot exceed his expectations. Therefore, Rolon can check Wakatsuki's movements before they become a threat, and to use his techniques in the best possible manner will confine the match to close quarters, a range at which Wakatsuki will fail to make direct contact and cannot execute his grappling or clinching techniques. Although Wakatsuki excels at close range infighting, Rolon can dodge his attacks before it begins, and as such, can avoid his striking techniques, including his Blast Core. Therefore, Rolon can discipline the wild tiger as if he was a veterinarian treating a kitten. Rolon wins. The Martyr of Muscles is said to be the only man in the world with more raw power than the wild tiger. In terms of physical abilities, Julius has perfected muscle control, the art of flexing specific parts of the body at will. As such, Julius can flex and relax each individual muscle fiber as if it was independent of the other, giving way to the god-killing drills, an attack that involves flexing the muscles to their limit and releasing it all at once, creating a strike so powerful it defeated Toei Mudo in a single hit. Since Toei Mudo outclasses Rolon when it comes to defensive power, Julius possesses more than enough power to defeat Rolon. When it comes to speed, Julius is just as fast as Toei, but slower than Wakatsuki Takeshi, a level of speed that doesn't compare to Rolon. For Julius to land his attacks, he must rely on his technical skills. Julius Reinhold does not practice any martial arts. However, for the sake of his muscles, Julius has studied sports physiology, sports medicine, psychology, and physics to maximize his potential and render techniques futile. As such, thanks to his extensive knowledge, Julius was able to deduce the weakness of Wakatsuki's Blast Core and apply a countermeasure to overcome it, while enabling him to overwhelm Toei's technique with nothing but sheer power. However, Julius's knowledge of science and medicine, along with his deductive reasoning, isn't enough to exceed Rolon's foresight. Therefore, Rolon can check Julius's movements before they begin, and, to use his techniques in the best possible manner, will confine the match to close quarters. Thus, Rolon can defeat the Martyr of Muscles in the same way he smoked the Beast of Destruction. Rolon wins. The Thai god of war is the hero of the public, who once again aims his fists at the king of an underground arena. In terms of physical abilities, Gowlan Wongzawat can damage Kano Ajito by drawing his blood and cracking his bones. Considering that Ajito is on par with Raya and Kuri, Gowlan can damage Rayan in the same way. Since Tokita Oma possesses enough power to damage Rayan, Gowlan possesses a comparable level of power to Oma, and because Oma has enough power to defeat Rolon, as the logic goes, Gowlan does as well. When it comes to speed, Gowlan is fast enough to overcome Carlos's pre-initiative with the speed of his strikes. Since strikes as fast as the Flash failed to overcome pre-initiative, and that Rolon can match the Flash, as the logic goes, Gowlan can strike faster than Rolon. On a purely physical basis, Gowlan has the advantage in this matchup. For Rolon to land his attacks and exert enough power to defeat his opponent, he must rely on his technical skills. Gowlan Wongzawat is a boxer who uses the Hitman style, a style of boxing which involves fighting at a distance using a variety of high-speed jabs, with the flicker jab constituting Gowlan's flash. Although Gowlan excels at outboxing, boxing at a distance, he can execute a variety of punches like straights, hooks, and uppercuts while infighting, boxing in close quarters. Furthermore, before entering the world of boxing, Gowlan was a Nok Mui, and as such, practiced the combat sport of Muay Thai, a striking martial art which rarely involves punching techniques due to the development of the clinch, and makes use of roundhouse kicks, knees, and elbow strikes. In addition, by emulating the movements of Muay Thai while making heavy use of punching combinations, Gowlan has achieved the acme of striking and stands at the pinnacle of all strikers. Additionally, after getting his right fist shattered by Ajito, Gowlan performed partial training to make a fist that was unbreakable, giving way to the God Glow, a right straight powered by Gowlan's unbreakable fist. Finally, Gowlan can discern his opponent's next move and can land his techniques by moving at the same time as them, giving Gowlan the ability to seal his opponent's movements with counter-initiative. Unfortunately for Rolon, Gowlan can strike fast enough to overcome pre-initiative. Although Rolon possesses greater foresight than Carlos, and as such, most likely requires more speed to overcome it, Gowlan can become even faster with his combination between Muay Thai and boxing. Therefore, Gowlan can overcome Rolon's foresight, preventing Rolon from checking Gowlan's movements. As such, the match will not be confined to close quarters, and Gowlan will be able to land his strikes. As a result, Rolon will have to rely upon his failsafe techniques. If Rolon tried to grapple Gowlan and limit his movements by performing a lock, he would fail because Gowlan can seal such an option by discerning his movements and striking Rolon first by moving at the same time as him. Therefore, Gowlan can stop Rolon from grappling by striking him before he can make direct contact. However, Rolon can land elbow strikes from outside Gowlan's awareness using the invisible elbow. Since counter-initiative does not involve either inception or the inception of intent, sensing the airflow on the skin and every hair to react or predict the opponent's next move, in contrast to relying solely on the user's vision, Gowlan will not be able to discern the invisible elbow because he cannot feel it coming, and because it comes from a blind spot, he won't be able to see it either. Furthermore, because blind spots disrupt reflexes by preventing fighters from seeing their opponent's next move, Gowlan's reaction to the invisible elbow will be delayed, and, as such, he will not be able to counter it, nor defend against it. As a result, Rolon will be able to land elbow strikes from outside Gowland's awareness and can strike him without warning. Since damage causes stamina to decrease, and considering how reflexes decline relative to stamina, Gowland will inevitably become slower and will no longer be fast enough to overcome pre-initiative. When that time comes, Rolon will check Gowland's movements, and, to use his techniques in the best possible manner, will confine the match to close quarters, a range at which Gowland cannot utilize his kicks nor his signature hitman style. Although Gowland can still utilize his punching techniques in close quarters, Rolon's pre-initiative will enable him to dodge his attacks before they begin. Therefore, the king can surmount the gods who gave him the authority to rule. Rolon wins. Now, on to the Elite Four. The King of Purgatory fought Tokida Oma in the final round of the tournament, and, as you all know, Rolon Donaire lost and became a cup holder. But I digress. In terms of physical abilities, as demonstrated in their match, Oma has enough power to defeat Rolon. In terms of speed, Oma is faster than Kiryu Setsuna, a level of speed that doesn't compare to Rolon. However, when using the Possessing Spirit at an unregulated output, Oma can move fast enough to overcome Yamashita Kazuo's Fist Dive and match the striking speed of Rain Kuri after he unleashed his latent power with the removal. Since Rain was fast enough to overcome Oma's pre-initiative without any amplification from his removal, Oma, at bare minimum, can strike just as fast if he unleashed the Possessing Spirit. Therefore, Oma is in a similar league to Gowland Wongsawat, who was fast enough to overcome Carlos Medel's pre-initiative. In addition, considering that strikes as fast as the Flash failed to overcome Carlos's pre-initiative, and because Rolon's strikes were fast enough to match the Flash, if Oma uses the Possessing Spirit, he would be faster than Rolon. On a purely physical level, Oma has the edge in this matchup. However, because Oma is reluctant to use the Possessing Spirit in a life-threatening manner, Rolon is faster than his opponent. For Oma to land his attacks and defeat Rolon, he must rely upon his technical skills. Tokida Oma is a practitioner of the Nico style, a martial art consisting of 4 katas centered around different skills. The redirection kata involves precise motions that manipulate the center of gravity and controls the flow of power, enabling Oma to perform locking and throwing techniques that use the opponent's power against them. The water kata involves flexible motions and the fluidity to accelerate or decelerate power, enabling Oma to perform holds, disperse power, and amplify power. The flame kata involves movements that amplify speed, bewilder opponents, and generate power, enabling Oma to increase his speed, amplify his power, and take his opponent by surprise. The adamantine kata involves tightening muscles for defensive and offensive purposes, enabling Oma to withstand more power and amplify his power. With all 4 katas combined, Oma has access to Demon's Bane, the Nico style's ultimate technique that turns the opponent's power against them, which is amplified further by the user's own power. Since Demon's Bane incorporates all 4 katas, the technique has no distinct form and is classified as a formless technique. Furthermore, after 2 years of training with the Kuri clan, Oma has attained the pinnacle of foresight and learned the Kuri family tradition, a system of techniques made with combat sports in mind, that is said to be able to counter all techniques. Fortunately for Rolon, as demonstrated in their match, he possesses better foresight than Oma, and as such, can check Oma's movements before they begin, and thus seal the Nico style. Although the Nico style's ultimate technique is a formless technique that the likes of Kuroki, an opponent whom Rolon compares in terms of foresight, believes is difficult to dodge, Kuroki was still able to defend against it. Furthermore, despite not possessing the pinnacle of foresight, Wakatsuki was still able to anticipate when Oma was going to use Demon's Bane and executed a countermeasure to stop it. Although Wakatsuki's countermeasure failed, if he can anticipate it, then so can Rolon. Therefore, Rolon can overcome Demon's Bane and contain the match in close quarters where he can use his techniques in the best possible manner. However, as shown in their match, the techniques present in the Kuri family tradition enable Oma to match Rolon's movements in close quarters and prevent his techniques from landing. Even so, as illustrated in their match, Oma cannot maintain such a balance for long because Rolon is more experienced at fighting in close quarters, and as such, was going to end the match by finding the right timing to use his techniques. However, Oma can exceed Rolon's expectations with the possessing spirit. Although Oma can become fast enough to overcome pre-initiative, he achieves that kind of speed by sacrificing his precise movements. As such, the possessing spirit creates waste that would make Oma's movements more predictable. Therefore, while possessing the speed necessary to overcome pre-initiative, Oma doesn't have the precision that makes his moves less obvious. Furthermore, the possessing spirit places a burden on the user's circulatory system, which damages the user and causes their organs to fail. Thus, to kill two birds with one stone, Oma unleashed the possessing spirit in small bursts, enabling him to compromise Rolon's foresight by speeding up in small bursts to throw off Rolon's predictions by the slightest margin, while keeping his damage to a minimum. Therefore, Oma can overcome Rolon's foresight, and, as such, can escape close quarters combat. As a result, Rolon has to rely on his failsafe techniques. If Rolon tried to limit Oma's mobility by grappling him, he would have failed because Oma could speed up to ruin Rolon's timing. Nevertheless, if Oma finds himself grappling Rolon, as demonstrated in their match, Oma can use Nico-style techniques to escape his lock. Furthermore, if Rolon utilized the invisible elbow to strike from outside his opponent's awareness using a blind spot, he would have failed because Oma knows how to sense Inception, and as such, can react to the invisible elbow by feeling it instead of seeing it. Nevertheless, as demonstrated in their match, Oma could also speed up to ruin Rolon's timing. Although Rolon was adapting to Oma's bursts of speed, and as such, could have eventually countered it, Oma's maximum output makes him fast enough to overcome pre-initiative, and because he can unleash it in a small burst, he can limit the waste and maintain his precise movements, which explains how despite using a technique that robs the user of their precision, Oma can execute redirects and kata techniques that require precise motions. Thus, although Oma is reluctant to use the advance, theoretically speaking, Oma can always exceed Rolon's foresight. Therefore, because Oma is able to land his techniques by exceeding Rolon's expectations, along with countering his fail-safe techniques, Rolon's defeat could have theoretically happened a lot sooner. Rolon loses. The King of Purgatory must now face off against a tyrant with a policy akin to that of a devil. In terms of physical abilities, due to their sparring record, Reian Kuri is stronger than Tokita Oma, and because Oma has enough power to defeat Rolon Donaire, as the logic goes, Reian does as well. In terms of speed, Reian can match the movements of Mokichi Robinson, a level of speed that doesn't compare to Rolon. However, after amplifying his physical abilities with the removal, Reian is fast enough to overcome the Fist Eye. Furthermore, since Reian was fast enough to overcome Oma's pre-initiative without amplifying his physical abilities with the removal, he is in a similar league to Galdan Wangzawat, who did the same to Carlos Medel. Considering that strikes as fast as the Flash failed to overcome pre-initiative, and that Rolon can match the Flash, as the logic goes, Reian can strike faster than Rolon. Additionally, Reian had the reflexes to track Oma's movements after he unleashed his possessing spirit and could overcome the Fist Eye. Therefore, Rolon's speed was never a guarantee against Reian. On a purely physical level, Reian has the advantage in this matchup. For Rolon to land his attacks and exert enough power to defeat Reian, he must rely upon his technical skills. The system of martial arts passed down by the Kuri clan includes the Kuri clan tradition, a set of techniques which are suited for assassination, and the Kuri family tradition, a set of techniques made with combat sports in mind that is said to be able to counter all techniques. Unfortunately for Rolon, Reian can strike fast enough to overcome pre-initiative. Although Rolon possesses greater foresight than Oma, and as such, most likely requires more speed to overcome it, Reian can always become faster with the removal, a technique that unleashes his latent power without creating any waste. Therefore, Reian can overcome Rolon's foresight, preventing Rolon from checking Reian's movements. As such, Reian can escape close quarters and land his attacks. As a result, Rolon will have to rely upon his failsafe techniques. If Rolon tried to grapple Reian and limit his movements by performing a lock, he would fail because Reian is fast enough to match Rolon's movements and has the reflexes to track him. Therefore, Reian can stop Rolon from grappling by striking him before he can make direct contact. Furthermore, if Rolon tried to land elbow strikes from outside of Reian's awareness using the invisible elbow, it would fail because the techniques of the Kuri family tradition enable practitioners to evade blows thrown from outside their awareness, an ability demonstrated by Oma, who evaded Rolon's blows in close quarters, a range where Rolon could strike from outside his awareness. Since Reian practices the same Kuri family tradition as Oma, Reian can evade the invisible elbow. Therefore, because Reian is able to land his techniques by neutralizing Rolon's foresight, along with countering his failsafe techniques, Reian can exercise his authority over the King of Purgatory and influence his policies like a puppet. Rolon loses. I made a 50-minute video about this matchup. If you have the time, you should check it out. In terms of physical abilities, Agito is on par with Reian. In addition, considering that Reian is stronger than Oma due to their sparring record, and that Oma has enough power to defeat Rolon, as the logic goes, Agito does as well. In terms of speed, Agito is faster than Okubo Naoya, and can match Hatsumi-sen's movements, a level of speed that doesn't compare to Rolon. For Agito to land his attacks and defeat Rolon, he must rely on his technical skills. Kano Agito is a practitioner of the formless style, a martial art involving a large selection of options, including a variety of kicks, punches, and elbows, along with grappling techniques like throws, locks, and holds, with such a variety enabling Agito to adapt to any situation. Furthermore, formless practitioners possess no form, making it harder for opponents to predict their next move, making Agito the natural enemy of foresight. In addition to the formless style, Agito practices martial arts, a fighting style that involves striking techniques, including a variety of kicks, punches, elbows, and Agito's signature technique, the Dragon Shot, a blow that can be thrown at point blank with minimal motion and minimal range. Furthermore, by limiting his move pool to striking techniques, Agito maximizes his reflexes to obtain the pinnacle of foresight. Due to his mastery of two opposing styles of combat, Agito can switch between them in order to exceed his opponent's expectations. Although the lag created by such a strategy was minimized by a few milliseconds, factors that serve to slow Agito's reflexes can make his switch less effective. Fortunately for Rolon, due to holding his own against Kuroki, Rolon has equal foresight to him. Since Kuroki was unshaken by Agito's formless techniques and was able to find an opening to attack, Rolon should be able to overcome the formless style in much the same fashion. Even considering Agito's martial arts, Kuroki won the contest of predictions against him. Since Rolon has equal foresight to Kuroki, Rolon can overcome Agito's martial arts in much the same way that Kuroki did. Nevertheless, because Agito exceeded Kuroki's expectations by switching between martial arts and formless, he can exceed Rolon's expectations in the same manner. Thus, Agito can escape close quarters combat and land his attacks. As a result, Rolon will have to rely upon his fail-safe techniques. Although Rolon can limit Agito's movements by grappling and locking his limbs, Agito can ruin his timing by performing a switch. Still, if Agito found himself locked in place by Rolon, he can use the formless style to escape Rolon's lock, because a lack of form will enable Agito to escape. Furthermore, if Rolon tried to land elbow strikes from outside of Agito's awareness using the invisible elbow, contrary to my 50-minute video, it would fail because Agito knows how to sense inception, and as such, can react to the invisible elbow by feeling it instead of seeing it. Therefore, since Rolon's blind spot will not disrupt Agito's reflexes, he can ruin the timing of Rolon's invisible elbow by performing a switch. Thus, because Agito is able to land his techniques by neutralizing Rolon's foresight and can overcome his fail-safe techniques, the Emperor of the Kengan matches can surmount the king and can conquer the kingdom known as Purgatory. My previous decision regarding this matchup has, regretfully, been nullified due to new information. Rolon loses. The ultimate spear versus the ultimate shield. The unstoppable force versus the immovable object. And a match between a man who can adapt to any situation versus another who can do the impossible with ease. In terms of physical abilities, Kuroki has enough power to defeat Agito. Since Agito is on par with Rayan, and considering how Rayan is stronger than Oma due to their sparring record, Kuroki is stronger than Oma. In addition, because Oma has enough power to defeat Rolon, as the logic goes, so does Kuroki. In terms of speed, Kuroki is able to keep up with Setsuna's movements and was just as fast as Azuto, a level of speed that doesn't compare to Rolon. For Kuroki to land his attacks and defeat his opponent, he must rely on his technical skills. Kuroki Gensei is a practitioner of the Kaiwan style, an assassination style that involves defensive blocking and parrying techniques, along with striking techniques like kicks, a variety of punches, palm strikes, and chops. Furthermore, the Kaiwan style involves rigorous physical conditioning, which makes every joint impossible to break, and the digits on both the hands and feet capable of piercing flesh and bone, enabling Kuroki to use the Devil Lance, a spear hand strike with the potential to give him a one-hit kill. In addition, the Kaiwan style involves Motionless, a style of foresight similar in principle to pre-initiative, and as a master of the Kaiwan style, Kuroki has attained it. Due to fighting each other to a draw, both Rolon and Kuroki possess equal levels of foresight. As such, both combatants will encounter a stalemate in which Kuroki and Rolon fail to land their attacks. As a result, Rolon will have to rely upon his failsafe techniques. If Rolon tried to grapple Kuroki and limit his movements by performing a lock, he would fail because he can't compromise Kuroki's foresight, and as such, Kuroki can react and avoid Rolon's submission. Even if Kuroki finds himself grappling Rolon, Kuroki's conditioning makes it impossible to break his joints, and it would be the perfect opportunity to use the Devil Lance. Therefore, grappling Kuroki is a poor decision. Furthermore, if Rolon was to use the invisible elbow to launch elbow strikes from outside his opponent's awareness, Kuroki can react to it because pre-initiative involves sensing the inception of intent to predict attacks that can't be seen. Since Rolon can't compromise Kuroki's foresight, Kuroki will be able to react to the invisible elbow. Therefore, Rolon has no means of overcoming such a stalemate, and neither does Kuroki. Therefore, in this match between the Ultimate Spear and the Ultimate Shield, the match ends in a draw. Rolon Donaire is more than deserving of being crowned the King of Purgatory, because not only can he defeat every gladiator within the promotion, but can stand on equal footing with the top brass of the Kengan Association, and has earned a pedestal among them. Although Rolon does not specialize in physique, power, technique, or speed, he is well-rounded on all of these fronts, and can bring all of those skills together to create a style that is greater than the sum of its parts. Nevertheless, it would be a waste for Rolon to face off against this metaphorical Elite Four if we do not mention the champion who reigns above them. The king of a small island will now face off against the king of the underworld. In terms of physical abilities, Edward Wu is stronger than Reian Kuri. Considering that Reian is stronger than Tokita Oma due to their sparring record, and since Oma had enough power to defeat Rolon, as the logic goes, Edward does as well. In terms of movement speed, after Edward unleashed his latent power with Guhun, he was fast enough to blitz Reian with the speed of his movements and strike him before he could see him. Since Reian could not track the movements of Mikazuchi Rei after he had attained speed beyond his own limit, and was considered the fastest fighter by a mile, even faster than those who overcame the Fist Eye, Edward is just as fast as Mikazuchi, and as such, can move faster than Rolon. In terms of striking speed, without unleashing his latent power with Guhun, Edward can strike faster than Reian after the latter unleashed his latent power with the removal. Since Rain was fast enough to overcome Oma's pre-initiative in one of their sparring matches without any amplification from the removal, Edward, at bare minimum, can match that kind of speed. Therefore, Edward is in a similar league to Gowland Wongzuad, who overcame Carlos Medel's pre-initiative by striking faster than his predictions. In addition, considering that strikes as fast as the Flash failed to overcome pre-initiative, and that Rolon can match the Flash, as the logic goes, Edward can strike faster than Rolon. Additionally, Edward had the reflexes to track Rain's movements after he unleashed his removal, a level of speed that enabled him to overcome the Fist Eye. Therefore, Rolon's speed was never a guarantee against Edward. On a purely physical basis, Edward has the advantage in this matchup. For Rolon to land his attacks and exert enough power to defeat his opponent, he must rely on his technical skills. The system of martial arts passed down by the Wu clan will most likely resemble that used by the Kuri clan, because they're both groups that share a common ancestry and are connected to the trade of assassination. Furthermore, because Edward, who is not an assassin but a combatant, utilizes them, some of their techniques must be made for combat sports in mind. Unfortunately for Rolon, Edward can strike fast enough to overcome pre-initiative. Although Rolon's foresight is superior to other fighters who have arrived at the pinnacle of foresight, and as such, require more speed to overcome it, Edward can always become faster with the removal, a technique that unleashes his latent power without creating any waste. Therefore, Edward can overcome Rolon's foresight, preventing Rolon from checking Edward's movements. As such, Edward can escape close quarters and land his attacks. As a result, Rolon will have to rely upon his failsafe techniques. If Rolon tried to grapple Edward and limit his movements by performing a lock, he would fail because Edward is fast enough to match Rolon's movements and has the reflexes to track him. Therefore, Edward can stop Rolon from grappling by striking him before he can make direct contact. Furthermore, if Rolon tried to land elbow strikes from outside of Edward's awareness using the invisible elbow, it would fail because Edward can counter the movements of professional assassins without looking at them. Thus, because Edward is able to land his techniques by neutralizing Rolon's foresight, along with his failsafe techniques, the king of the underworld can smoke Rolon's pack. Rolon loses. Hello guys, I think I hit a new record for being the cringiest Kengen YouTuber ever. If you have made it this far, congratulations. It must have been a really long journey because it took me a long time to make it. After this, I think I'll never talk about Berserker Bowl ever again because it has exceeded my expectations in glorious fashion, and I don't plan on doing a whole lot of YouTube stuff after this because I'll be busy. Therefore, until next time, this was the Cyborg Whale named after Italian cheese and a dessert item. Goodbye.